Hello everyone. How are you all doing? So, I am not in my usual setting, and that's because I'm home in my childhood bedroom. Welcome. I have been inundated with questions from people on social media and friends messaging me about what it was like traveling during COVID-19, because for maybe those people who didn't inundate me, if you don't know, last Friday I traveled home from England, and I'm here for 6 weeks to enjoy the summer. Whoop, whoop. After not being home for 7 months, which sucks. So yes, grateful to be back. It was shit scary. I was very anxious before the flight. I took some videos of me shitting my pants.
I'm so scared.
I traveled with Ryanair, and Ryanair do not have any social distancing regulations on their flight, so that was really great. I was very lucky. I was flying from East Midlands, and a friend of mine coincidentally was getting on the same flight, and we sat together in the very expensive Ryanair seats, which are in the front.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you figure know what the Maltese.
And thankfully, those were relatively empty. There was maybe 1 or 2 people in each sort of aisle. We were lucky that we got, you know, out of the 3 seats, no one sat next to us. I do have to say that the rest of the flight, you know, as soon as the cheaper seats started, the rest of that area was rammed, full of people. The only enforcement Ryanair has is that you have to keep your mask on throughout the entire flight unless you are eating or drinking. So yes, you could be sat next to a complete stranger to your right or your left with just masks on, and then they eat and they breathe. You know what I mean? So it's not very helpful. I think there should be at least 1 seat between people who aren't in the same group. But anyway, that was the flight. It was quite relaxed for us because we chose to pay that much more to sit far away from people. So obviously, if you can't afford to, if you can't afford, you're not gonna fly. But if you don't feel like you want to pay much more to get the expensive seats away from people, then you are stuck next to strangers, which isn't great. They don't serve anything hot on the flight, and that's really it. All they do is masks. In terms of airports, I want to say really shit on both parts because there were no temperature checks. So East Midlands Airport, all they did was ask people to be social distance. They didn't even enforce it. We were in the queue for about 45 minutes and no one was coming around enforcing the rule, and people were just getting closer and closer. My friend Adela and I were just like putting bags either side of us, like people stay the fuck away, like no one come close, but they still came within a meter of us, which was very uncomfortable. People were taking off their masks. No one was there to enforce. So again, East Midlands Airport, bullshit, because no social distancing. They just sort of like over the speaker go, please social distance, blah blah blah, and then you wonder why England is fucked. But anyway, no temperature checks before you get on the flight. The only difference now is that instead of handing your passport over to someone and your boarding pass, you literally just scan it to yourself. I always have my boarding pass on my phone anyway. Scan it to yourself and like lift up the passport to someone without taking off your mask. So they never actually see your entire face whilst checking the passport. Not sure how helpful that is, but anyway. And then when I got into Malta, I was very disappointed. There were no temperature checks. On the bus, there was no social distancing. In the queue, there was no social distancing. Everyone just sort of passed by a nurse who was in front of a computer, who I imagine maybe that was like heat detector. I don't know. I genuinely don't know what he was looking at because there was like no camera pointed at me that I could see. He just took my papers. I went to security desk, handed them my passport. I didn't even lift it up for them to see. They touched it. I got my luggage. It was straight away on the carousel, thankfully. And within 10 minutes of getting off the flight, I was in a taxi home. 10 minutes. Okay. Today, I took it upon myself to go get a COVID test, and I quarantined for 24 hours. I didn't hug my mother, my father, and my sister after having cleaned all my clothes, had a hottest shower ever, and ruined my sister's bathroom in the process. So sorry. They decided they felt safe to hug me, and thankfully I came out negative and I'm fine. 5 days later, I didn't want to film this straight away in case I filmed it and then all of a sudden I developed symptoms. I haven't. I'm very grateful. I'm safe. But I do have to say, there were so many English people on our flight. I heard the flight attendant say we were 128 people on the flight. There were about 4 actual Maltese people on that flight, and the rest were all English. They're not fucking getting tested after I arrive. They're not social distancing. They're arrogant motherfuckers who decided to come on a holiday, okay, after their country did shit at COVID. So, in conclusion, no temperature checks in England, no temperature checks in Malta, but to go to a play outside in Malta with 0 cases, I had to get my temperature scanned. Yet to come into the actual country, I didn't get my temperature scanned. Just putting it out there. If you're planning on flying, if you're planning on traveling, if you are in Malta and you do want to go abroad, maybe I wouldn't suggest it. Abroad right now is not the same. Malta is completely free, completely empty, so it's great. Normal life, hugging people, whatever. The rest of the world is not like that. So, if you don't have to travel, wait a year. Like, you can wait a year. You don't have to travel. If it were up to me, I wouldn't. I hope that answers all your questions. If you do have to travel because obviously like you lived abroad and you have to go get your stuff, that's totally fair. You do you. Really, guys, it's not a time for like massive holidays to, I don't know, wherever in the world. People are going to Sicily and Malta, but again, Sicily is quite low in cases, so that feels quite safe because it's only like half an hour away. But yeah, everywhere else in the world, I'm like, stay home. The one thing I do have to say is wherever you are coming from or going to, look at the government advice. So go on, for example, Gov UK or Gov Malta, look at the advice that's given, look at the things you have to fill out, because every country you enter you have to fill out papers. Like in Malta you have to fill out papers. When I go back to England I'll have to fill out an online form, and that's really it. Google is your best friend. I hope this helps answer some questions people had. You might generate more questions to ask me after this, but I think I covered all the basics. If you are traveling, do stay safe, do get tested. It is the worst feeling in the world. I felt like someone was picking out my brains like I'm some mummy being mummified. It's worth it to make sure you keep you and your loved ones okay and safe. Thanks for watching. I love you all so much. Goodbye.